So I would look at that. You know, when he asks, is there something that he's totally overlooking, I'm somewhat hesitant to tell Tom, because he's a retired engineer, is to just live with the crack. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
How's it going?
Editorial Director Brian Pontalillo.
Hey, everyone.
And our fantastic producer, Jeff Rose.
Good morning.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Well, thanks for being here, guys. Did you even notice I screwed up the intro? But we will just move right along. Matt, what have you been doing with your time? I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, well, ever since I broke my toe, I'm kind of on light duty, but I was trying to get back into that breezeway project that I started more than a year ago, I think, and haven't finished. I take the Jeff method. As long as it's not finished, you can't complain about how bad it looks. But yeah, one of the main things I needed to do was dig out some of the wood for sort of the top of these cabinets. I had gotten, butternut. So I bought this stuff last spring. I probably bought that about a year ago. And, not long after that, my parents sold their house and I had to move out all of this wood from my dad's shop and outside and everything. And so that stuff that I had bought ended up buried underneath all of that. So I spent a couple hours, pulling out roughly 1,300 board feet of lumber to
Good gravy. That's a lot of wood.
To get my 5 boards from the bottom of this pile. Very gingerly, trying not to, re-injure my toe. So yeah, that was fun.
So I've never worked with butternut. What's butternut like to work with?
It's
buttery.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's extremely soft. It's probably not something you would really want to use for a tabletop or anything like that, but it is really pretty. This stuff is, I don't know if it was like a downer log or what. It's kind of, I
what does that
say
mean?
Spalted, something that had fallen in the woods and just got dragged out. I mean, it probably wasn't. It was probably just a tree that maybe was, rotting, standing up a little bit. There's a lot of holes and stuff in it. But it looks beautiful. It looks really good, but it is soft. It's pretty easy to machine. So,
yeah.
So this stuff is in the rough, I presume?
Yeah, this is completely rough sawn.
Do you like to do the, finishing of boards?
Now that I have a 6-foot joiner, yeah. Now it's nice. And a 15-inch wide planer. Before, when I was doing, the same thing with a slightly under 4-foot jointer and a much smaller planer. No, not as much.
Yeah, I've found that part of the process to be really kind of nice and soothing work when, I don't know why, but when you have the right equipment. Like when I used to get to work on
is it the deafening noise that appeals to you, Brian?
That could be part of it. The muffled deafening noise with your ear protection on, it's kind of like white noise. But yeah, when we had the fine woodworking shop to work in, I always loved milling
yeah, but
lumber.
Once you have that, everything else is just a pale comparison. I think you'd agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done it since.
Right? Because why would you?
Yeah.
Do you like that, Jeff? Do you like surfacing boards?
I haven't actually done it a whole lot.
I'm going to bring you my planer and you can try it out.
Well, I have a planer and a small jointer, but haven't done it that much. That's all.
What's nice about that to me is getting really nice boards from the lumber yard, right? Stuff that you can't, get at the home center or whatever. But as far as the, zen of finishing boards, I don't quite get that. It seems like a lot of hard work and lifting and moving and, and then they twist and cup and all kinds of stuff afterward anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, back to the butternut for a second. I've never worked with butternut, but I did finish a butternut kitchen once. And it was this, it not only was it, did it have kind of that spalted look that you were talking about, Matt, but it also had wormholes. Mm-hmm. And it was, I believe, this was a long time ago, but I believe we finished it with water locks or a water locks mixture. and it was gorgeous when it was done, like really stunning.
Yeah, no, it looks beautiful. The one part that I did finish already, because this project's been going on for a while, and so it started with one bank of cabinets, and then it's moved on to some other stuff. And I just used floor poly on it to try to give it some, try to give it something that would last, because it is so soft.
Classic Matt.
Yep.
So have you started the construction with this butternut yet, or are you still getting in the stuff prepped?
Yeah, I haven't even started the prep. All I did was move the wood, and by the time I was done with that, I think partly because I haven't been doing any, sort of heavy lifting for a while, my back was killing me. Yeah. I was like this. Mm-hmm. I got a little tweak in my back. I was like, nope, that's it. I'm done for the day. But fortunately, it was right at the end.
Wow, that's I can't wait to see how that shapes up, man. That sounds fun. So you have to get all the stuff cleared out of there again, I presume, out of your breezeway.
Yeah, and I had sort of started to tackle that too, so that's mostly cleared out. A lot of what's been in there has just been empty boxes, ordering everything, all this cat food and dog food for the last year. And I mean, I break down the boxes and recycle them, or burn them. But over the last 2 months, I think we've had a burn ban, so that just stopped. So now I'm back to burning boxes. Because the recycling, I don't think they've been doing anything with them. Like they haven't been shipping the stuff off to China like they had been for recycling. So I think it just ends up in a landfill. So
I worry about that. I see the volume of cardboard boxes that my neighbors put out, and at the transfer station. I would love to see in some resource how much packaging we've started using since the outbreak, because I'm sure it's a significant bump.
Yeah.
Versus what it was.
Yep.
Jeff, what have you been doing?
Wound up rearranging my garage last weekend.
That sounds like a very spring thing to do, man.
Yeah, well, I got a friend of mine gave me a mechanic's tool chest, so I needed to kind of find a space for it.
How exciting.
Yes. So now I have two of them side by side.
Do you have one metric and one standard?
I thought about doing that, but I don't really have enough of either to really justify that.
Well, you just have to buy more tools. It's clearly the solution to that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like...
This is my new pride and joy.
Oh, wow.
So, Matt, I'm glad you're on the show, because I want to bring this over to your place and try and get those disc brake calipers off the Vibe. Do you still have that car?
I do still have that car. The one that I was having the trouble getting them off of, though, was my old Subaru. And
okay.
That I eventually did get them off. I haven't tried taking them off the Vibe. It may need that. Because actually, the last time I had to take a tire off. So I should tell folks
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is my little 1/2-inch impact wrench, and it's like 4 inches deep, and I can't wait to try that thing on something.
So you haven't used it yet?
I haven't used it yet. I don't want to get it dirty, Brian.
Yeah, it looks like a piece of art almost.
It is beautiful. Taiwanese made. It costs a little over $100. It allegedly has 425 foot-pounds of torque, so that should do most things, I would guess. I can't wait to try it out. That just means I have to get dirty and fix something, though, unfortunately.
So as a non-mechanic, I have a question.
Sure.
So a lot, as my understanding, that a lot of mechanical work, you have to measure the torque that you fasten things to. And can you do that with a pneumatic impact wrench?
No. You typically tighten it to a certain point by, intuition with an impact tool, and then you have to go back with a torque wrench.
You crank it with a torque wrench for the right pressure.
Yeah, and some things are tightened incrementally. Like you may have 3 torque settings that you work up to gradually. You know what I mean? Like you don't tighten one bolt to the finished torque. You tighten them all to a lower torque, and then an intermediate torque, and then all to the final torque.
Patrick, you should do a special show on cars.
Yeah,
mechanic stuff, just to get it out of your system, and no one will listen because it's the Fine Homebuilding podcast, or maybe like a few people will, but you'll have a good time.
Oh my God, I got so much to talk about.
Find a few good guests, and Go for it.
It's funny. It's something I've gotten into later in life. I didn't like working on cars when I was younger because I just didn't have the experience or patience. It's something that you need to learn to do, or you end up breaking things, and it's very frustrating. It takes longer and costs more sometimes than if you'd have just taken it to get it fixed. But once you learn how to break things and you stop doing it, then it's more fun. Brian, do you want to talk briefly about your condo? What's going on?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No,
That's
it's
too
over.
bad.
It's over.
So are
Well
you back
done.
to looking?
We will start again in we'll start again in a few weeks. Whatever that looks like, I don't know. But I was part of me was excited about this was going to be an excellent place to live, and an excellent place to live the way that it seemed like it was going to be an excellent place to live the way we have are thinking that we'll be living for the next few years. But at the same time, the idea that we get to keep looking is just as exciting. And the idea that, that the downside of condo living for me was that there'd be nothing for me to do to the condo. And the upside of looking is that I just like to look at wrecks and imagine what I could do if I bought them. And so I get to get back into that a little bit.
So are there things to look at even? I mean, I hear in some places there is just no inventory.
Well, right now we're just kind of decided to put it on pause because of some timing things. And we'll probably be starting back up in about a month or so, and we'll just have to kind of monitor the market. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why prices are where they are and why people are paying all cash and over asking prices, because there's I don't know if it's a historically low inventory, but it's certainly lower inventory than it's been in recent times. There's just not a lot on the market. So as soon as that changes, I think prices will stabilize or come down a little bit to more reasonable.
Well, I'm going to appeal to our listeners who might be in that area and might have some property to sell that you're looking. And if you guys have offers, send them to Brian. Oh, my goodness. So we heard from Tom in Carbondale, Colorado. Hey, FHB podcasters, I was listening to number 356 and several topics prompted me to write, especially since I was working on a veneered panel for the remodel that I'm finishing. I'm a serial remodeler by avocation, so I get to do a lot of things once in a while. Some things I get pretty good at. Concrete counters and cabinets are good examples. Drywall, not so much. I also see my imperfections every time I walk by one of them. I've decided that a strategically placed piece of furniture, knickknack, or picture are a great help. I also felt compelled to comment on the discussion on radiant floor heat. Since remodeling has been so much fun, I decided to build an entire house. My wife's desire to have her horse on the property may have had something to do with this decision. I will hire everything to get dried in, and then it will mostly be me, except for the drywall. I am the architect on the project as well. I've decided to put in radiant floor heat, even though my goal is to be close to net zero on this build as possible. Mostly aided by a grid-tied 15 kilowatt PV array, air-to-air heat pump, air sealing, and better than code insulation. You discussed on the podcast about how a well-insulated house would not offer the nice warm floor that people expect with radiant heat. I fully expect this, but there is one benefit that seems to go unmentioned. For me, it is worth the extra expense of a cool floor. I hate forced air or anything that requires mechanical movement of air in my house. I live in Colorado at 7,200 feet elevation. The nights are cool, so no AC is required. I looked at mini splits, but just can't get past the fact that I will have to deal with a fan blowing warm air around all winter long. On the same vein, there's been quite a bit of talk in FHB forums, magazine, etc. about triple glazed European tilt-turn windows. Clearly, they are very efficient and expensive, but they open into the interior space, great for getting a really tight seal, but why would I want to give up the space in front of the window? No table with plants or furniture or counter can reasonably put in front of that kind of window. My house will have 9-foot ceilings, so that is 162 cubic feet of unusable space in front of a 3-foot window. What am I missing? Windows in my house are open most evenings and closed during the day from late spring to early fall. I have decided to go with triple low-E casement or awning windows as a result. Wow, that sounded more like a rant than I intended. Thanks for the great podcast.
You know,
Some great
I
points
love
there.
that the final commentary about the tilt turn windows is such a good one, and it would be great to hear from, you know, some architects, and maybe we can reach out to like Emily Mottram up in Maine, who uses them all the time, and just get some like thoughts on, you know, what do they do differently. Um,
I
given
thought the same thing, and it never
Yeah,
made a lot of sense to me either. Like, you can't put any furniture there.
yeah,
I think the answer is people don't open their windows.
Well, I think
Right? I mean,
yeah,
everything is
I mean,
climate controlled now.
this is true.
yeah. But I mean, not every window in the house has to be operable either. I mean, you can, you know, have a fixed window in between or next to one of these, you know,
Right.
tilt turns. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, because, you know, I lived with these for a long time, and I remember specifically having like a sort of a I don't know, it was like a dining nook in the last house I lived in, and it had two of those, you know, tilt turns at the end of it, and I could not put anything on the end of the table because of that, you know. And you couldn't like have it situated with a chair there, because then you couldn't open the windows with a person there, or if the windows were open with a person there, they might, you know, slam into them or whatever. So, you know, it is a legitimate concern, sort of, you know. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a legitimate concern. Um, Especially if you're designing or remodeling and you don't think about it. But if you think about
yeah,
it, it shouldn't be a problem. Like
right,
it's just another kind of aspect of how you have to design the building. I've not, you know, thought about that at all or talked to anyone about it. So I think it'd be interesting to hear like how they do think through that.
yeah.
You know,
One
good
thing that's kind
designers
of
do think through it.
one thing that's a little bit, I don't know, like mind-boggling about it is that European wall assemblies tend to be a lot thicker, so you end up with these like really deep sills that just like beg to have stuff put on them, and you can't with these types of windows.
Mm,
And the other thing that's a little weird is, you know, even though they open in, there's typically no screens on those. I don't know if Europeans just like living with bugs or what, but they're it's just like there's so many things that, you know, we're probably used to, you know, as Americans, like having screens on windows that they don't have, or, you know, consider including in some of these. And maybe they're different in the versions they sell in the US. I don't know, but that always kind of bugged me.
I want to, you know, I love the discussion of tilt turn windows too. I think that's something we should definitely pursue further. I want to comment on the radiant floor heat.
Yeah.
So if you don't want forced air, and, you know, I get that, kind of, you know, what about radiant panels? You know, like Sonia Barantes, am I saying that right, Brian, from Ripcord Engineering, talks about their projects in
yeah.
Maine that use these panels, and you get that radiant warming, but they cost less and they're more efficient than a, you know, a floor system. And I don't know. I said if you got a low load house and you want to be net zero, you can't be running pumps. Is the thing I keep hearing over and over again. And I don't know if you need pumps with these radiant panels. My assumption is you do, but I think they're moving a lot less water, so the pump is smaller. But what I don't know about it is a lot.
Well, are those circulator pumps really consuming that much energy?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
are.
like yeah, because of static, you know, pressure, right?
Hmm.
It's physically pushing the water through a bunch of pipe, and yeah, they have, you know, a electric motor on there that's at least 100 watts.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to be net zero, that's a big load.
Hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to try one of those radiator panels in the bathroom that I remodeled in my last house, and I just made a cost, you know, a price decision not to do it because the baseboard heating was already there. So I was going to just run the plumbing to the wall panel, but I decided against it. But I was really curious to see how it would work. And I was curious about one of the ones that incorporates the towel warmer into it. It seems like such
Yeah,
a nice,
that's cool,
you
right?
know, nice idea for a bathroom. You know,
Totally. So they have those in electric versions, and they also have these panel radiators that are electric that are like built into the drywall, for lack of a better description, and you don't see anything. It's just
right.
it's a surface, but you obviously have to be careful not to put your pictures hangers into it, right? So, Tom, thanks for the feedback. All good stuff, and I like your suggestion of just putting a knickknack in front of your bad carpentry. Hi, all. I think Tom's question about living in a home you have worked on strikes a chord with anyone who has worked on their own house and cares about quality. I remember lying on the sofa in our old house and looking at the plaster ceiling I had patched. I could see the outline of the mesh drywall tape I had used. I had to remind myself that other people wouldn't be staring at the ceiling. My first major project on the house was in 1983 when I did a complete gut remodel on our bathroom. Looking back, my biggest accomplishment was that I did my own plumbing, including the new drain, waste, vent, and supply lines. However, those things were not visible. What I stressed over was my tile job in the shower. This was then standard 4x4 ceramic tile. It was a struggle to keep all the lines perfectly straight and all the tile flat across the wall. As you mentioned on the podcast, I started really looking at the tile jobs in commercial restrooms and felt much better. After building our new house, there are many finish areas where I wished I had done a better job. At the time, I just wanted to get it done. I keep thinking about redoing some things, but after 11 years, it doesn't bother me as much. If someone wants to get picky about the fit of the doors or the miters on the baseboard corners, they can leave. I think that's it. I mean, I would say, from my own experience, you really know when you should be doing a better job. You know, you're like, I just got to get this done. I can't spend any more time on this. Well, and when you feel that you've not done the best job, that's when you need to keep working at it, I would say. Or you'll regret it later. Or you
I
won't.
remember that letter reminds me of a comment that I believe it was Rodney Diaz, our art director, made one time when he was talking about, I think it was Rodney, but I may be wrong. So I don't want to put the words in Rodney's mouth. It wasn't him, but he was talking. Someone was at work was talking about a trim project they had just done and how exactly this, how they were not happy with the results. And I think the results were their proportions. And Rodney's comment was, "Just don't invite Mary Ann Cusato over for dinner."
So we asked folks about their experience with Glavel, which is easily the best product name ever. And we heard from our friend Mason, Lord of Hudson Valley Preservation. Hey, FHB gang. I use Glavel on as my underslab insulation on my Unity home, an 1,800 square foot Zum. Zum? Do you guys know?
Zome, is it?
It's ZUM.
Yeah, I don't know. No idea.
Anyway, it's their modern house. It's really attractive. The material cost of the Glavel was about 25% more than installed sheet foam. Labor to install the Glavel was in addition. The material does come from Europe. A Burlington, Vermont company is importing it and planning a U.S. manufacturing facility. They were a pleasure to work with. Rob Conroy, the U.S. Glavel CEO, would be happy to talk about the material. Hear that, Rob? You're getting called out, so getting ready for Glavel calls. So the other thing that Mason said is it's big. Like some of the pieces are bigger than 2 inches, so I don't know if I would want to try and compact that. I would want to know that going in, that it was going to be different than just like 3/4 inch stone. So if anyone else has their experience with Glavel, I'd love to hear about it.
I wonder if those pieces kind of break up as they're getting compacted when they're that big. I mean, it's just aerated glass, right? Like
Yeah,
it shatters into place.
Well, so I'll put the photos that Mason sent us up on the podcast page, but it doesn't look like gravel. It looks like asphalt chunks to me, and some of them are really big. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it has an R value
Yeah,
of what?
because it's got entrained air in it.
Right.
You want like the actual R value, Brian?
Do we know? I found it on a website called finehomebuilding.com about 1.7 per inch.
7 per inch. That's great.
No, 1.7 per inch.
That's not as great. I mean, what's cool about it is it's recycled material.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Mason, as always. Any other folks out there who have used foam glass or Glavel, love to hear your reports on that. This comes from another Doug. Tarping. My background was also almost exclusively residential new construction, framing for custom homes all over the greater Toronto area. As I've launched into my own work, I've come across more remodeling jobs that require tarping and covering. Now at some stage of the job, it's easy, but when you've taken the roof off, got a few walls up, but no ridge beam, no rafters, and a storm is brewing, what is the best tarping solution? From demo floor walls can sometimes be a week or more, and our weather reports are notoriously inaccurate. How do you recommend protecting a house being renovated from a storm at this stage? Can you all please discuss good tarping strategy? Doug. Wow, what a great question. It only has to go sideways before you take it really seriously, right?
Yeah, I think you were on one of those jobs, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I absolutely was.
Oh, man.
And I've done this myself and at a level, and had rain pour in on my bedroom while I was sleeping in it. So someone else should go first, obviously.
I mean, probably the gold standard for something like this would be to, scaffold around the structure and, tarp over it. And I think you've been on jobs like that too. And I mean, that's probably the most expensive solution, but the most sort of foolproof is to basically create a structure outside the structure. But I mean, if possible, I mean, you may just change your sequencing and, not have to tarp at all. I mean, if it's possible to put on a roof over the existing roof, or do the roof before you do the interior, and then sort of work undercover.
You mean get it dried in as soon as you possibly can, or part of it, right? Work more incrementally.
And just change the order that you do things. I mean, it can add a lot, some extra steps, but I mean, it can avoid a lot of headaches down the road if you're able to do that. And I realize you're not able to do that on everything, but I mean, think of ways to get around having to rely on tarps.
As Doug suggests, though, there are some parts of the construction process when you're adding a level or adding a dormer that, you just have to tarp. They're just, and admittedly, you want to keep it as quickly, the time as brief as possible, but there just are some stages where you have to temporarily keep the house dry.
Yeah. I mean, and some things I was thinking of, I mean, if you're going to be putting a new roof on, you don't need a lot of pitch to be able to direct water away. So if you're able just to set the new ridge beam right on the walls and then tarp over that, that's enough slope probably. I mean, I think a 5% slope will get you about 22 feet roughly, on either side of a 2x12. So, or not on either side total. Which may be enough slope. And then, you just got to really secure that tarp to the walls below. And I mean, there are easy ways to do that. I mean, you can just sort of wrap the ends of the tarp in sort of strapping in like a 1x4, and then sandwich another one on it and screw it. And, you can roll it up, when you need to work on it, and roll it down really easily. Gravity takes care of that. And then you can just screw it to the wall.
I agree. Brian, you have thoughts?
I don't know that I have tons of thoughts on this. The two things that jumped to my mind were fastening long boards to the ends of the tarp. It makes it, number one, it makes it easy to get the tarp nice and tight and held in place. But also, when you do need to roll it up, it makes it it's a nice thing to kind of help you with that. You have something to be working around. And so that works really well. I used on one project, I used a little bit of weight that I could hang over the edges of the roof and just kind of help hold the tarp tight. Have the tarp ready. That was like this. We did a roofing article many years ago now, a re-roofing article, and one of the roofer's pieces of advice was have a big tarp in the back, behind the seat of your truck.
Yeah.
So you got to have what you need ready. And then this isn't tarping, but one of the things that comes in really handy for protecting openings are big pieces of rigid foam. Maybe not on roofs, but like when you have like doors out of buildings and windows out of buildings, and if you run into, you run out of time in the day or whatever, you don't get done what you think you're going to get done. It's really easy to tack a big piece of rigid foam up over like
versus
an open
a piece
window.
of plywood, that's super heavy. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, exactly. It's lightweight. It stays in place, and so that's also something that I've used and I found to come in really handy.
I say, Doug, you can't go home, at 5 o'clock sometimes. If you can get a ridge up all of a sudden your job is so much easier with regard to tarping. If you're trying to tarp a floor without walls or any pitch to it, forget about it, right? So, it might be a long day, and nothing is going to save you from, a thunderstorm that blows up and has high winds, right? So you better have, like Brian says, a tarp ready, and you better tie it down way more than you think you need to. The cool thing I was just thinking of, so Michael Patterson, who's a remodeler in Maryland, recently wrote in with a tip to Fine Homebuilding, and when he has to do this, he gets a big Rubbermaid trash barrel, puts it on a post, and then throws the tarp over that, and the trash barrel disperses the tarp so the piece of lumber, the post doesn't poke through it, and it kind of creates a nice drape over, someone's at a level or dormer addition. So I thought that was pretty smart. I think if you can get the ridge up, and even better, a few rafters to help hold the tarp up, it's so much better than trying to tarp something flat.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got any thoughts on this, Jeff?
Just even some sort of a ridge, even if it's just a temporary structure, just to get some kind of pitch to it, some elevation.
That's a bottom line. Scott from Boston writes, "Hello, FHB podcast. The ceiling in one of the small second floor bedrooms in my 1890s era mansard roofed Boston home has a pronounced dip in the center. It looks like the original plaster is still well attached to the lath, but the added weight of a second cosmetic ceiling surface has caused the slender 1x6 ceiling joist to sag an inch or two. I've received conflicting opinions from contractors about what to do. Should we jack up the middle of the room and install a strong back in the attic perpendicular to the joist? Sister new joist, fasten the joist near the middle of the room to the rafter above with a king post? Cut out the old ceiling and start fresh?" At least one contractor refused to consider jacking the ceiling up for fear of breaking something else in the house. Unfortunately, I need to do something because I recently installed a ceiling-mounted mini-split cassette, which must be perfectly level, and so currently it cannot sit flush with the ceiling. Thanks, Scott. Oh boy. So
I don't think we have enough information, but
so
I don't know.
You think
I
you
don't know
should
if that stopped us
start cutting
before.
around in there, Matt, to figure out what's going on?
I think probably first getting contractors in there to look at it might be the wrong place to start. I might get a structural engineer in there to see what needs to happen to figure out what loads are on those joists, like if they're acting as, as some kind of, other restraint for the, I imagine, this is a mansard roof. So, those are the, holding the top of the roof together as well, more than likely. So I wouldn't just go start cutting that out willy-nilly.
No, that would be bad.
Yeah. So yeah, you may have to sequence, the way you replace them. I would probably take it out and do a new one personally, rather than rely on those one buys. I don't know how you're going to fasten a strong back to those without splitting them out, because that's pretty narrow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and the idea of jacking that, depending on how much force is needed, you're probably going to have to, get a load path all the way down to the basement.
And my suspicion is you destroy the plaster, right? It's not going to survive.
You're not going to be able to move it slowly enough that you're going to avoid cracking that. Now, if that's behind this other finished ceiling, whatever, I have no idea what this thing looks like. It's really hard to say, but it seems like the best solution is to do something new rather than try to repair what's there. But that's just me.
I think I would put stretch a string up there on the top side of the ceiling joist and see what's going on, see if there is a real deflection in them or if something else is at work at a minimum. I would be tempted to fasten light gauge steel joists or studs to the side of the existing ceiling joist to make a level ceiling if that was your only intent. But there are definitely structural elements with regard to this ceiling with the style of house, as Matt points out. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I don't think you're at risk of, if you sistered beefier joists in place, that's not something that would be concerning, right?
Right.
Because at that point you simply know that you're strengthening what's there. So the question, if that were the route that he chose to go, then that wouldn't be too concerning to me as in terms of the structure. And trying to, I don't know, I guess I'm just thinking through this, trying to flatten out the ceiling. If you're beefing up the structure and you try to flatten out the ceiling and the ceiling cracks, or you have repairs to do, I mean, the other option is taking the ceiling out. So it's not like you're adding work, right? It's you might be lessening the work if then those repairs are doable. If the cracks, if the cracks are repairable. But yeah, it's always the case, right, that you do collateral damage when you try to
Fix stuff.
when you try to move an existing structure into a different position.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's always a real possibility. But again, I don't think you can go wrong by beefing up, whether you sister lumber to it or light gauge steel to it. I don't think you can go wrong by beefing up the joists.
I think there's a whole different approach you could take with this too. What about just like, a tapered extension jamb to allow this ceiling cassette to look better in the ceiling? I mean, you have to have some expectation that old houses are going to have some weird conditions. And this house has been there since the 30s, right? Isn't that what we've learned? So, I mean...
Yeah, and if it's not already cracking, if it's deflected that much and things aren't already cracking, maybe it's going to stay there for a while.
1890s.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's... Some engineer is going to tell me I'm like totally wrong about that because there's inherent flaws in a mansard roof system from this era and ticking time bomb.
There's lots of them around, though. I mean, they're not falling down.
Yeah. I learned one time, and I don't know if it's true, but the walls, which are, sloped on a mansard style roof, right? It usually has these sloped walls, often with dormer windows. And then there's usually like a little pyramidal hipped roof on top of this. But those walls, even though they're angled, are like, for engineering purposes,
considered
thought of as straight.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
How's that work, Matt?
Well, I think largely, I think it's, code, I think also considers them walls at that, at whatever angle or whatever they're at. And I don't know that it's still obviously a roof. I mean, it still relies on basically the rafter ties, I think, to kind of hold it up. It's like you're basically building a truss. It's essentially just a gambrel roof, but it has, you're gambling all around it rather than just on one side of it. So
it's a cool form. I wouldn't want to roof one.
No.
Okay, here we go. So, dear Fine Homebuilding crew, I'm working my way forward through all the podcasts. I'm at 170 and moving forward. Thanks for an educational and entertaining program. We have a 2,200 square foot brick-clad wood frame, 1.5-story lakefront house built in 1948, located in White Lake, Michigan, northwest of Detroit. The upper floor is mostly built into the roof on the front elevation with a 32-inch knee wall. Since buying the house in 2012, we've been fighting a crack that appears under the knee wall on the living room ceiling. The living room is under a large guest bedroom above and has 2x10 ceiling joists on 16-inch centers under the upper floor spanning just under 14 feet. The knee wall in that bedroom is about 48 inches in from the outside wall with a large dormer window in the center of an 18-foot long wall. The floors were recently refinished. The original oak throughout over 3/4-inch pine, subfloor set on a 45-degree angle. The ceiling and walls are plaster over gypsum board, typical for that time. The plaster has held up well, as the original builder was reportedly a masonry contractor, and the foundation is solid. Typically, the crack appears and grows worse in the winter, though we do run a humidifier. I have painstakingly cleaned out the crack, notched it, and taped and hot mudded it now 3 times using increasingly wide tape, and most recently fiber mesh. The mesh has prevented the crack from breaking through, but it still appears as a big lump in the ceiling after being very flat after the last repair. The size of the crack/lump seems to grow and shrink with the seasons. Before the last repair, we insulated the triangular cavity outside the knee wall as part of an extensive remodel with dense, packed, blown-in cellulose insulation. I had high hopes that reducing the temperature differential across the joint below the knee wall would help, but no such luck. It would be very easy to drywall over the ceiling except for one significant issue. The living room ceiling has an original plaster 8-inch radius cove around the perimeter of the room. It hits the ceiling plane with a 1/4-inch ledge detail also formed in the plaster ceiling, creating a shallow recess highlighting the ceiling plane. Did you guys see the ceiling? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
In the remodel of our dining room, which has the same ceiling detail, we had to blend and rebuild a small section of the cove when we opened up a wall. I can tell you it was by far the hardest, dustiest, and most time-consuming part of that project. It was probably like 8 feet of this, right? I do not want to lose that detail as it matches other parts of the house. It's original and frankly one of the things that attracted us to the house in the first place. Yes, you have to leave that there. It's beautiful. The overall depth of the plaster ceiling, based on past work and remodeling in other parts of the house, ranges from 3/4 to 1 inch. The gypsum board is 1/2 inch of that. Above the ceiling, there is likely original 1948 fiberglass batt insulation, about R5-ish, with dense pack above that. The triangular section outside the knee wall is too small to access for a person. I'm attaching plans and pictures to illustrate the problem. Okay. Based on what I think is going on, here are the options I have thought of, knowing now that a simple crack repair is not enough. Did you guys read his multi-pronged approach here? It's fantastic.
Yes, this goes on and on and on.
Okay, so he says, 1, remove a section of the plaster and gypboard about 1 foot on either side of the crack for the length of the room. I'll screw 3/8-inch plywood to the joist across the opening with 3/8-inch drywall over that. Tape and blend to the ceiling. Number 2, do all of number 1 with 2x8s sistered onto the original joist, flush with the lower cord as far into the joist cavities as possible, and secured with structural screws. Number 3, same as 2, but with angle iron substituted for the wood beams. Do you think I should apply any upward pressure using temporary support under the ceiling when I'm fastening new plywood and beams to better allow them to settle back and take the load? I'm hoping not to remove the installed insulation. During an earlier dining room model, we learned the original batts will hold the blown-in insulation up during a repair. However, if we add structural members sister to the joist, I will likely use the continuity of the felt paper vapor barrier on the 1948 insulation. Do you have any other ideas? Am I missing anything altogether? Again, I'm seriously trying to preserve the edge detail of the ceiling, which means I cannot change the height of the ceiling plane. Here's the whole nut of the whole thing. I'm a retired mechanical engineer with pretty extensive amateur home remodeling, building, and design experience spanning 40 years. I love tools and projects, but like to look forward to the next one instead of working on the same one over and over again. Thanks in advance for your thoughts to fix this forever. I'm happy to be phoned, text, or emailed as you see fit. Wow, what do you guys think? That's from Tom.
First, I would say, have you tried just not running the humidifier? Like, I mean, if that's all it takes to fix it, then see if that works.
So you think that during the wintertime, because Tom is humidifying his house, that lumber is expanding and creating this spread in the plaster?
I have no idea, but I mean, he suspects that may be a contributing factor, and I would want to eliminate that before I started doing other stuff.
I think that's good advice. So for how long do you think we need to not run the dehumidifier or the humidifier?
Well, I mean, if it happens every year, then one year I think would be enough. Yeah, just one winter. Just one winter.
Okay, that's interesting. Brian, what do you think?
Well, I agree with that. I agree with Matt's suggestion. And after that, I don't know, because I have fought similar consistent cracking in a drywall ceiling, and been unable, repair after repair, been unable to stop the crack from happening until I just decided to cut out a big section of the drywall all around the crack and put in a new piece with seams in different places and taped it, and it prevented the crack from coming back. So I don't know if at some point, you just have such a vulnerable spot that it just cracks easy. If that's the case or not, I don't know. But like I said, I like him. I try to hold this one pesky little spot, and I tried a whole bunch of different repair techniques. And the only solution was to cut out the drywall and have the seams land somewhere else, and it worked.
Jeff, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, one thing that came to mind is that since this is plaster over gypsum, if he's using joint compound, that behaves differently than plaster. So that might be a possibility.
Very interesting.
And the other thought,
I think this is related to an air leak.
I've got to be honest. Like, I'm very confused about the assembly. Like, I don't understand it. Like, it sounds like there's a room above this, but then there's insulation in the floor. I don't quite understand what's going on.
I'm going to paraphrase as best I understand it. So, above this space is a second floor with a sloped ceiling and a knee wall that is 3 foot interior of the footprint of the floor below.
Yeah.
And it's probably bearing on if the joists are running perpendicular to this knee wall, it's bearing on them all. And
well, I mean, obviously that would be a problem if that is a load-bearing knee wall, but my impression was that those rafters are actually sitting on the exterior wall, but I can't tell that for sure.
Yeah, so the insulation, the attic space behind the knee wall, it's probably attic space behind the knee wall, and so the insulation probably runs in the ceiling joist to the knee wall and then up the
he
knee
mentioned
wall.
there, you guys might have
that they had filled
dozed
it with
off, but it was filled with cellulose. Yeah,
right.
That triangular knee wall space.
Right. So he's just talking about like a tiny little space of the ceiling that's insulated, then not the entire thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it would be real easy for cold air to be getting down those knee walls into this ceiling assembly, right, and doing weird things.
Yeah.
So I would look at that. When he asks, is there something that he's totally overlooking, I'm somewhat hesitant to tell Tom, because he's a retired engineer, is to just live with the crack.
Put 10 panels over the entire thing. Done.
You can't, eliminate that cove detail. That's absolutely the coolest part of this ceiling, I'm sure. And,
but I don't think there's a reason that he couldn't, cut out a section like Brian suggested and just put new drywall and feather that back in that one little section.
I think the suggestion of the plywood might be a good one too. Underneath that, what do you think, Brian? Instead of just putting drywall back that spans this crack on feet on either side, would it be helpful to put plywood underneath a layer of drywall?
I don't know.
It seems like it would prevent movement.
Yeah, it probably could. I did that when I built a closet in my bedroom, mostly, to have a place to fasten the new closet wall to, but also a place to fasten the drywall, at least the edges of the drywall. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I guess it could. I guess that couldn't hurt.
We're all at a loss.
I just wonder, thinking about Patrick's idea, there's a temperature differential, just investigating that with an IR camera or even just a IR thermometer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that would show moisture movement too, right? Because things that take on a lot of moisture are colder. because they're drying, right? And they're giving up heat as that is
Right.
happening. So building diagnosticians often use IR cameras to look for, roof leaks or air leaks. So I would definitely consider that as a diagnostic tool in this case. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And it's going to give you a chance to play with an IR camera, Tom, which is going to be pretty awesome.
Which
I'm
is
sure.
fun.
You'll find all kinds of things to worry about that are bigger than this crack. This is from Chiseler, from our FHB forum. Chiseler asks, I'm replacing my 80-year-old rotten wood front porch columns with new 4x4 Western red cedar posts on top of galvanized steel standoffs bolted to a concrete porch. The structural 4x4s will be wrapped with AZEK PVC composite 1x trim boards for appearance and weather protection. The non-tapered columns will measure 5.5 inches on the outside, so there is about a 1/4 inch airspace surrounding the 4x4s inside. Should these columns be ventilated? I live in Virginia, where humidity can be high. All right, Jeff, you go first this time.
I don't see why. I mean, but I'm purely guessing.
Are your porch columns peeling?
They are.
That's why.
But
I
they're
think
not
that's
wrapped in AZEK.
right. Right. What do you guys think? Does that make it better or worse?
I don't think it can. I mean, the need for a ventilation space with PVC trim, I'm not sure, but I don't think it can hurt to have a little gap in there for any water that does get in there to drain anything and maybe promote a little drying. Then you do have you have cedar posts, but you do have wood posts underneath, and if wood has air around it, it's a good thing.
Totally agree.
So I don't think it can hurt if he can, if there is going to be space, if he can evenly space the wrap to give a little bit of a gap evenly around the post, why not?
Yeah. And then you got to leave gaps at the bottom and top in order for that to actually function, because there's not going to be any moisture getting through that PVC.
Right. Yes, you'd have to space the standoff the top and bottom.
Yeah.
What about the worry for bugs? Is that are we creating bug habitat in this little airspace?
Nah.
No? Because the wood is dry?
A 1/4 inch. I mean, some bugs might get in there, but bugs are going to find a way in there, probably whether you intentionally gap it or not. I mean, PVC, this is PVC. I mean, as soon as the sun hits it, it's going to expand quite a bit. You're going to have to leave gaps, I think, at the ends anyway. So, bugs are going to find their way in. So, I mean, if you want to use some kind of a screen top and bottom, you're going to limit the amount of airflow through there, but you'll also keep the bugs out. But PVC is going to grow and shrink quite a bit. I mean, I look at the PVC tubing that is in my garden, and it's all staked down, but when it gets hot, that stuff just flops all over the place. And then as soon as the sun goes down, it shrinks right back up.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Your point is that unlike wood, which grows in relation to its rings, PVC grows in length in addition to across its width.
Yeah, it grows in every dimension with heat or shrinks with cold. So
I think that's a very good suggestion.
Yeah.
I like the gap because it gives you a little leeway with regard to posts that inevitably are going to twist or do some weird things oftentimes too. It might mean that your joints stay tight when they wouldn't have if you put the PVC tight to the underlying material.
Mm-hmm.
They make column wraps, if you don't know, Chiseler, that are already prepped for this very application. They have mitered corners, and they come as a one piece that then you fold around a 4x4 post. And to me, it seems like a huge labor savings. And if you glue all those joints with PVC cement, it seems like a pretty rock solid, good looking column.
Yeah. Andy Engel did I can't remember if it was a Building Skills or Master in a Minute or something like that. years ago using lock miters for this. He used a lock miter bit in in his router table, and it created like really, really strong joints that were pretty easy to assemble.
The challenge with that joint, Matt, right, is the setting up the router to get everything to plane out when you're done. I hear can be a complicated process of trial and error.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have, two cutoffs, you can figure it out.
Just keep working until you get the second thing to line up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like doing a cope and stick joint.
Exactly.
I mean, it takes a few minutes, but once you have it set up, then you can run as many lengths of as much, linear footage of board as you need.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just that kind of thing that like you got to put a little time into setup and then you're good to go.
Yep.
Did you guys see I posted yesterday on Green Building Advisor for help with our new modern refrigeration equipment story that's coming up in issue 302? I got no response. So So there's this technology that's now in refrigeration equipment, heat pumps and air conditioners, variable refrigerant flow. And what these, in layman's terms, or as I best understand it, are compressors that are variable speed, and they can modulate to match the exact load. And there's a couple different ways these work. They were first used in light commercial buildings with what amounts to mini split heads, and then you'd have one or more, outdoor units to power these. And the most sophisticated ones can make heating and cooling on the respective heads at the same time. And then more simple systems that are more common in residential systems are like your normal air handler or furnace equipment. They live in your basement or your crawl space or whatever, and they just have a variable speed compressor that runs, conditioned air through ductwork, like, a furnace or air conditioner we are familiar with for decades. And so if anyone has familiarity with these systems, designing them, installing them, living with them, I would love to hear from you because this deadline is coming right up, as Brian has reminded me. So have you guys heard of this technology?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like it solves the fundamental problem of sizing heating and cooling equipment, is that it's always sized for nearly the worst case scenario or the worst case scenario or double the worst case scenario. And these systems can typically modulate from 35% of their capacity up to sometimes more than 100% to deal with unusual conditions. And it means that your equipment is now running in the sweet spot most of the time, which is something you can't say about conventional equipment. So that's why I was interested in it.
But we're all looking forward to what you find out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have anything to talk about?
I don't think so.
I'm having a yard sale this weekend.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you want to come by and buy some garbage? I got to pay for this new impact wrench.
You got any other good tools for sale?
I got some tools on the pile, yeah. Nice. Nothing I want. Since I've been introduced to battery-powered LED work lights, I have two, plug-in ones because all of a sudden they're ridiculously obsolete.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any powerful LED work lights? It is life-changing.
I have one that I bought when one of my lights got knocked over on a shoot, and the modeling light went out, and I didn't realize that the flash still worked. So I ran out and bought a work light, a battery power. Well, it works on both. It can either be plugged in or battery powered. And it wasn't nearly powerful enough for the shoot. So fortunately, I realized that the flash still worked. So I was able to salvage it. But
yeah, I had a power pack blow up on a shoot one time and did the same thing with work lights. And what you learn is that the strobes are a bolt of lightning with regard to how much illumination it is. It's mind blowing.
Yeah. They can pretty much blow out the sun.
Yeah, it's insane how much light that is for a short period of time.
Yep.
It's always fun when we have electricians on the site. When I do a shoot with the strobes, it's hilarious. They inevitably jump 3 feet into the air because their only experience with that kind of flash of light is when there's a dead short. Jeff, you have anything to add?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we're forever holding our peace. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Matt, Brian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, and review us however listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. Keep craft alive. Happy building.